So we're well on our way. We finished problem 1. Now,
Problem 2. After you. This time, the professor would like to give each student as much help as needed. Some students need more time, others less. Extend your solution to problem 1 to include this behavior. Hint: add another field and constructor to the student class to store the amount of time the student requires.
that's a pretty good hint. Let's take a look at the input. So if we take a look at the input, we see that the input is changing a little bit. We still get the integer n denoting the number of students that want to see the professor, and we still get n lines where each contains the time, t, and then we also get the single word string denoting the student's name, and then we get another integer, r, denoting the amount of time the student requires. So if I look down at my example input, we see it looks almost the same, but then we have an integer at the end of the line. So we'll have to modify problem 2 to look like that. And so, in fact, the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and copy most of what we've done and just paste all of that in. And so we have the solution from problem 1 just carried over, and I still have my student class. So I don't want to change anything so that I've wrecked what's happening for problem 1, but I don't have to. So I'm going to update this, and I'm going to read in new information, but I need a place to put it. So let's take a look at what we received this extra line, and that is we get this integer r denoting the amount of time the student requires. Okay, in terms of the rest of the processing, it's the same. So the student arrives, same as problem 1. Student leaves, same as problem 1. Next student is the same as problem 1, except instead of 15 minutes, each session lasts r minutes. So we're going to have to get back the information about that particular student. And the output is the same as problem 1. So everything is the same except for those details. So in problem 1, when we look at the output, we see that Alice arrived, sees the professor at time 60, and then she left at time 75. In problem 2, because she only needs 5 minutes, it's a quick question, she arrives at time 60, sees the professor, and leaves at time 65. So that's the big difference. And in fact, the bulk of our work is going to take place in the student class. So, and the hint was largely given to us. It says, hint, add another field and constructor to the student class to store the amount of time the student requires. Great. Okay, so the field that we're going to add is building upon problem 1 that we've already created, is going to be time required. We'll call it time required. And it said add another constructor. So we're going to leave that constructor as it was so that it works for problem 1. But this time we're going to change one thing. We're going to now have a new constructor that receives 3 arguments. And so there are 3 parameter variables, and the last one is going to be of type int, and it is time required. And so now if you construct a new student and you pass it 3 variables, 3 argument values, then it will automatically use this constructor method. And int this time required is equal to whatever they pass. And that's it. So we've created the new field, the new constructor, and I'm going to make a public getter to return that get time required. And we'll just return the time required. Okay, so if we go back to problem 2 then, we still have to update something, but not much. So the only thing that we're going to need to change here is certainly our input. So we're going to read in the input in these first few lines. This time when we read in the input, we're expecting more. So in the past, we were just expecting an arrival time, and a name. This time we are going to get a third piece, and that is another integer called time. We'll call it time required, and it doesn't matter that I have the same name as before. It's just because it is descriptive. We're going to pass that to what is now going to automatically know, because I'm passing it 3, it's going to call this constructor method, not the one before. Okay, so this is done. We've created a student with that new information, and then the only other place that we deal with that time is somewhere down here. When a student meets, the next student meets, we say the meeting time is time plus 15, but that's not what we want. What we want is we want to look at that student in the meeting and we want to get their time required, whatever that is. So it's not 15 minutes anymore, it's student dependent, and so that's pretty appropriate. Okay, and I think that's it. So if I go and I grab our test input, we'll see if we've done it. The proof is in the running. We'll do a quick check. What are we expecting? Time 1:16, Dale leaves. So if I look at this, I can do a quick check based on what I gave it as input. Let's go back to problem 2, and we'll see I gave it Alice needs 5 minutes. She arrives at time 60 and she requires 5 minutes. Here we see Alice arrives at time 60, sees the professor because nobody's in with the professor, leaves 5 minutes later. Then there's a period of time goes by before Bob arrives. Bob arrives, sees the professor because no one's meeting with them, and Bob requires 15 minutes, we see here, and so Bob is going to leave at time 95, but in the meantime, Carol arrives. So as soon as Bob leaves, 15 minutes later, that frees up space for Carol to see the professor, and 5 minutes, it's a 20-minute meeting, so they should be done at 1:15, which happens, but in the meantime, Dave arrives. And Dave is allowed to see the professor once Carol exits, and he only requires 1 minute. He had a quick question and out the door. So that's it for problem 2.